The next thing we're going to talk about is how to get a standard form quadratic into vertex form. So the first thing I need you to realize is the thing that separates standard form from vertex form is parentheses. So that's what we're going to add first. We're going to add parentheses to the problem. If there was an a value, we would then want to factor that out because a is supposed to be outside the parentheses when it's in vertex form. But there's no a value here. So the next step is to complete the square. Completing the square has its own formula. It's b divided by 2 squared. So we're going to do that inside the parentheses. So right now, inside the parentheses, I'm going to put a plus blank to make room for it. And then I'm going to put the plus 54 is going to stay outside the parentheses. So b happens to be negative 16 here. So this is going to be negative 16 divided by 2 squared, which is negative 8 squared, which gives me that this value is 64. Now what we have to be careful about is since we're in an equation, we have to keep it balanced. We can't just add numbers wherever we want. But we're not really going to put anything on the other side of this equal sign because we want that to stay f of x. So what we do instead is we subtract outside to keep it balanced. We're going to subtract the same number outside. So essentially we only added 0 to the problem. But it's setting it up so that we can now factor this part here. This is now a perfect square trinomial. To factor it, we take the square root of the first term, which is x. We take the sign from the middle term, which is minus, and we take the square root of the last term, which will be 8. That squared is going to result in the same thing if we were to FOIL that together. It'll go back to x squared minus 16x plus 64 because it's a perfect square trinomial. That's what completing the square creates. So then this is going to be minus 10 if I add those together. And that is now in vertex form. The only other thing that it asks you to do here is to identify where the vertex is, which is super easy now that it's in vertex form. It's 8, negative 10. So this would be another way of doing the standard form problems without using that shortcut formula that I taught you, is you could change them to standard form first. Alright, the next one is just a little bit stranger. There's that number in front. So I just need to show you what's going to change here. That number has to be pulled out. A always needs to be outside the parentheses. So we're going to go ahead and pull that 3 out, but we're only going to pull it out of the ones inside the parentheses. You're going to put the parentheses down first where you want them. We're putting parentheses around the x squared and x terms. Then we're going to go ahead and put the plus blank. Then it'll be plus 6, and I'm going to automatically put a minus blank, so I'm remembering to keep my equation balanced. And now we're going to find the number that completes the square using the new b value, not the original one, the one we got after we pulled out the 3. So it's going to be 6 divided by 2 squared, which is 3 squared. This is going to be 9 inside there. Now the number we subtract, we have to be careful about. This 9 we just added inside is automatically getting multiplied by the 3 that we pulled outside. So the number we subtract is not just 9, we have to also share that 3 with it since the 9 inside is getting multiplied by the 3. So then this is 3, we're going to factor this down, x plus 3 squared. Again, that's the square root of the first term, sine of the middle term, square root of the last term. And then we're going to simplify that. 6 minus 27 is going to be negative 21. This is the vertex form of that equation, and then you need to write the vertex opposite of h, comma k. So it'll be negative 3, comma negative 21. Okay? Alright, this page, they're asking you to find the vertex form of the equation, but they're giving you a point and they're giving you the vertex. So my suggestion first would be to write down what vertex form looks like. That's what they want us to use. So this is vertex form. And we can plug in what they told us, but you've got to put everything in the right spot. This right now is the vertex. What letters can we plug the vertex in for? That can go in for h and k. So I'm going to plug those in for h and k first. That's going to be minus 1. And then it'll be plus 2. And then if we look at the point also can get plugged in. A point comes as x comma y. So I'm going to plug those in for x and y. So it's going to be negative 6 equals a times 3 minus 1 squared plus 2. Then from here, you're just trying to solve for a. That's really all we were missing. We already knew h and k to get the vertex form. The only letter that was missing originally was that a. So now we're going to go and we're going to find it. A was missing here. So we're going to go and figure out what a is. Just be careful with your algebra. You have to follow your order of operations. This is going to be negative 6 is equal to, I'm going to square this. I'm going to do parentheses first. We'll take it one step at a time. And then my next step is going to be to square it. When I square that number, it really should end up in front of the a because it's being multiplied. So that's 4a plus 2. Always move that squared number out in front because that's really its coefficient. And then we're going to subtract the 2. We get negative 8 equals 4a and divide by 4. We get a equals negative 2. Your final answer is to answer the question. They wanted the vertex form of the equation. So it's going to be y equals negative 2 parentheses x. Make sure you're plugging the vertex back in, not the point. So it'll be x minus 1 squared plus 2. That's our answer for this problem. So if you want to pause it and try this next one, just to make sure you understand what's going on, I'm going to fill it in 3, 2, 1. So again, I would write down the whole formula first. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to plug it in. Now, I think some of you can probably plug in all the numbers at the same time. So this is going to be h, this is going to be k, and this is going to be x, and this is going to be y. So let's plug them all in at the same time. This is negative 5 is equal to a times x is negative 4. And then this will change to plus 7 since it's minus negative. And then plus 1. And now we have negative 5 equals a times 3 squared plus 1, parentheses first. Then we're going to square, that's going to be 9a plus 1, and subtract the 1. We get negative 6 equals 9a. Divide by negative 9, you will get a fraction here. Negative 2/3 equals a. And then just make sure you plug, all we're plugging back in when we go to get our answer is you want to plug in a, and then you want to plug in h and k. We're going to leave the y and the x because in order to have a equation to graph, it has to have a y and an x in it. So it's y equals negative 2/3 parentheses x plus 7 squared plus 1. That should be your answer. All right, the last thing we're looking at is how to find the maximum and minimum value of a real-world problem. So what I need you to remember first, this goes back to like the second page we talked about, is where the maximum or minimum is located. That point is always located at the vertex. So even though the problem is going to ask you for the maximum or minimum, you need to read into that they're asking you to find the vertex. So in our example, it says a small video company determines the profit P for producing N DVD copies of a recent release is P equals, they give us this equation. P is the profit in dollars, and N is the number of DVDs. We want to know how many DVDs should the company produce to maximize the profit. So there's the key word. It says maximize, and they gave us a quadratic. So we need to know, we need to read into that means they're asking us to find the vertex. Now this first part tells you which part of the vertex they want you to find. It says how many DVDs. If you notice, DVDs in the problem was called N. So we're looking for N here, which is really in the place of X. And you have to pay attention to what form that equation is in. It's in standard form. So you have to think of how do I find the X coordinate of standard form. Do you remember the formula from the earlier problems? It looks kind of like the quadratic formula. We're just going to call xn here. So n is going to be negative b over 2a. That's the formula we used before. Then we're just going to plug in the numbers they gave us in the equation. So it's going to be negative 3.4 over 2 times negative 0.02. I'm going to multiply that bottom first. It's negative 3.4 over negative 0.04. If you don't multiply the bottom, you've got to put them in parentheses to keep them together. And then type that in your calculator, and you should get that this comes out to 85, and we were finding DVDs, so I'm just going to label it. 85 DVDs will maximize their profit. And then they want to know what the maximum profit is. So if I read that carefully, the maximum profit is going to be asking us to find P. Well, that's like asking us to find the Y coordinate. So this is just the Y coordinate right now. How did we find the Y coordinate in standard form? We plugged in X. So you just have to take the answer from that first part, from part A, to find part B here. So I'm trying to find P. I'm going to plug in 85 as N, and it's going to give me what the maximum profit should be. So these sound complicated, but it's the same math we were doing on the previous page. And if you type that in your calculator, you should get an answer of $128.50. So that is the maximum profit. Okay? So try the worksheet where I'm going to have all the answers for you guys tomorrow. I'll go over any questions you might have, but most of this should be within your reach. You guys talked about quadratics last year. You should have seen this stuff. It's just kind of all thrown together in one section.